Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the King George County Board of Supervisors. I'd like to start off this evening with the invocation by Mr. Collins and followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you could all please stand.
Today, I want to start the day with you on our mind, Lord, and in our heart. As I dress, let me wear the armor you have provided daily, the helmet of salvation, the breastplate of righteousness, the shield of faith, and the belt of truth, the shoes of peace, and the sword of the Spirit. With prayer on my tongue, praise you and petitions for those around me and those I meet. Amen.
Pledge of allegiance to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Mr. Miller, any agendas or any amendments to the agenda tonight?
And yes, sir. We need to amend the agenda to reflect that the adjournment would be to next Wednesday, the 27th, for the work session, not to the 20th, which is what it says in the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Thank you, Mr.
We have one more, which would the need for a closed session.
Move to amend the agenda to include closed session as presented.
Second.
All in favor? No discussion. Okay, we have a motion properly second. Any discussion?
What's the closed session and I haven't seen it.
Would you like me to read it to you right now?
Something new?
Sure. I'll read it to you right now if you want. So it's going to be to convene in closed meeting pursuant to code section 2.2-3711A5 and A7 to discuss a projected timeline and process related to a prospective business or industry where there is no previous announcement of a business or industry locating or expanding in the community, and consulting with legal counsel regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice, namely land use matters associated with a prospective unannounced industry.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we have any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Moving on, public comment. We'll open the floor up now for public comment. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person in order to afford everyone an opportunity to speak. If comments relate to a specific public hearing item, we ask that you offer those comments at the time of the public hearing. Is anyone here for a general public comment? Seeing none. Mr. Dines, anybody online? Has anybody received any correspondence or emails?
No, sir.
Ms. Worrell, you want me to read that comment you sent me that I missed last week? Yes, ma'am. I'll send it to you for the public record.
Okay. All right. Seeing no public comment, we will then close public comment and open it up to reports from members of the board. Mrs. Bender.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Let's see, hold on. I am passing a report from our representative on the CTAC and FAMPO Jaren Hayes Committee. She wrote and emailed me about the discussion at the April meeting was concerning the 2050 FAMPO Long Range Transportation Plan. And the committee, while not agreeing on many things, do agree that while another crossing of the Rappahannock is needed, it needs to be done with as few new roads as possible using many existing roads. Why is this important is because they mentioned King George and bringing it across Port Conway to Route 301 to Port Royal. And that's a very ambitious goal, and that the chair will be bringing it up the chain of command, as he put it, through GWRC. So we might be having some public comment or people coming to talk about that. So I don't know how feasible it is, but they're moving forward. So I thank Jaren for bringing that to our attention so we have a heads up. I attended the stand-up of the 19th Space Defense Squadron. It was a cool time, and it was an interesting ceremony to see one one office decommission and a new squadron brought in, and with the changing of the flags and the speeches. It was cool. And I want to thank everyone involved in the ceremony held on base. And the new Commander Smith spoke on the excitement of coming to the area and strengthening a bond between the base and especially our youth interested in STEM and other related fields. And I wanted to give a special shout out to the Second Lieutenant Cassandra Dayrit, I hope I get that right, who did a nice job putting it all together. And one of the little interesting tidbits that the commander talked about was that when he went to ask, how do you put together a ceremony like this, the Navy personnel didn't understand. He basically was just make it up as he went along. But he said is because this has never been done before. So we're setting the path and we're creating the script to go forward. So that was pretty neat. It was a nice ceremony. And I attended Costello's Ace Hardware ribbon cutting on Friday, April 1st. And thank you for the invitation and great conversation. The new owners have done a nice job upgrading and expanding the options in the services at Ace Hardware. Soon after our last meeting, I was reached out to by some constituents about the dangerous conditions of the trailers at Potomac Elementary School. These trailers were gifted to the school system over 5 years ago and have sat vacant since that time due to varying factors. The wooden insulation are rotting and a hole formed, and the residents were concerned, and then I became concerned. My daughter went to that school, that the children and families that frequent that after hours, that becomes a dangerous situation. So I went down there and viewed it, and it went up the chain of command, and they will be removed soon, hopefully, and they put up some fencing to help protect so children would not go in there because there is quite a gaping hole. I did walk the site. I took a nice tour with the principal, and I am still concerned with the other two modular units on the other side of the property. And once again, I will be bringing it up in the CIP process and the true maintenance plan for the school system. We need to be proactive and not reactive. Next up, the Dahlgren Heritage Museum, in partnership with Claudette Jordan from the Ralph Bunche Alumni Association, have been working with a professor from UMW for the last several years, researching the history of how the land was acquired for the military base at Dahlgren. Pre-COVID-19, the museum hosted a series of talks on, it was called Seized Land. It was an interesting time. The second part, which they're hopefully going to have some interview series this year, will focus on the time from 1918 to World War II, and especially the African-American community that was displaced during the war years. And the board reached out to me to ask, and I can send this on to my colleagues, I just got the update today, wanted to know they're going to have 7 panels that are created from this, that UMW is partnering with them and creating it, and they want to tour it around the county so that, and put it in different public buildings. They're having an event at Whitehall, I think it's April 28th, as sort of an announcement of a partnership with Whitehall, and they wanted to know if we would be interested to maybe have it set up in some of the county buildings as part of this. So I was looking for consensus from the board, and I can send you the information sheet. Some of the topics are life-changing notification from the ground up, making a living teaching and preaching. And these are all panels like the ones that were done for the Ralph Bunche alumni. This is just taking the Seized Land series and putting it on panels. So I guess just consensus, maybe Mr. Miller can work with Mr. Gates to figure out what county buildings we might be able to display them in. They want to do it as a rotating display.
You said it's the same panels that were up down at UMW?
Yes, this will be focusing on Seized Land, meaning the 2 different time periods, pre-1918 and then the World War II time period when the 2 communities were displaced from the base, when they acquired the land for the military base. So it's the story of how it came about. All right.
I think that's fine. I think we're all in agreement with it.
Can you just give me the contact information and I'll be happy to reach out?
I will do that, and they'll be very happy because they've worked a really long time on these panels and putting it all together. The last thing I want to bring up, and we can wait to the end to do this, but I wanted to express my condolences to Dr. Young and his family for the passing of Stephanie Young, who was one of a valuable member of our community, and she passed away last week. And one of the things I would like to highlight about Stephanie, and it meant a lot to me, is as many of you know, I was chair during 2020. And Stephanie was a great asset to our community, going around and helping the citizens, delivering groceries, bringing food. She did that her whole time here. She was very big in giving back to her community and making sure everybody was taken care of. But she also did things like the KG flash mob during 2020 to help our local businesses that were hurting from lack of people, especially the restaurants, coming to the businesses. And she would have those little flash mobs at those locations and bring food. And a lot of people are going to miss her. Even though she moved to Texas, she had a big impact in the very small time she was here. And I went and looked out after the Service Authority meeting at the plaque outside. And in 2020, we had no Making a Difference Award winner. And I would like to suggest, and maybe a consensus of the board, that we designate 2020 as Stephanie Young was Making a Difference Volunteer Award, and we put her name up there on the plaque outside.
Second.
So I'll make a motion to put her name on there, Making a Difference.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure other people would like to give their special thanks to the memory of Stephanie. And I would like to propose a moment of silence at the end of all of our board reports in honor of Stephanie. And I really appreciated her, how she reached out to me when my father passed away. And Stephanie, I'll tell you, you'll be missed. And I'm sure you were doing great things in Texas too. So that is the end of my board report. And thank you, Stephanie.
Wednesday, April 6th, I also attended the 19th Space Defense Squadron stand-up ceremony, so that was a very exciting time, as Ms. Bender alluded to. It was interesting to see the starting of new traditions, so very exciting to get to witness that and the beginning of something new. That evening, I also attended our Board of Supervisors budget work session. Thank you to staff again for all the time you've put into helping to provide information and craft that budget and get us what we need. So I really appreciate your help and work to get to that position we're in now. Friday, April 8th, I attended a discussion with VDOT along with Ms. Kupka and Mr. Miller to discuss the hop yard circuit in regards to the fact that it is above ground and looking about the effort in order to have it be a buried line because of the impacts. Obviously, I'm sure everyone remembers January, the significant impact we had due to weather, but all that line being above ground. I think it was about 3 miles, if I remember right, that they were looking at. So they're looking to have that buried in order to help provide better consistency to that area. On Monday, April 11th, attended an FRA board meeting. In particular, Miss Jennifer Morgan, she's the Virginia community lead with Riot. They're an entrepreneur support group, and so they're having she detailed some of the things they're doing. In particular, having a kickoff on April 27th for new entrepreneurs that can come in and attend. So if anyone's interested in starting up a business or anything along that lines, it sounds like this is a group that could maybe help with figuring out how to move forward with that. And if you're interested, let me know. I can try to make a connection between you and Ms. Morgan and see if there's any availability to that. I know it's coming around the corner soon in about a week. Also brought up that the FRA is looking to try to bring in some site selectors like they have done the last couple of years to evaluate the region for the presentation at our annual meeting. Wednesday, April 13th, again, we had a budget work session. So again, thank you to staff and my colleagues for working through that. And then yesterday, Monday, April 18th, we had an FRA strategic planning session. So the FRA has strategic goals that they're working to attain every year, 5 years, 10 years, and kind of working their way out. So just going to go into the process of reevaluating what those goals are and seeing how we've done over the course of the last couple of years to see if they need to be tweaked and what we need to do in order to try to be as effective as possible. That's all I have. Thank you.
Ms. Kupka.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Granger mentioned on Friday, April 8th, we had a call with Dominion Energy officials, Mr. Miller and Chief Moody, regarding a solution for the hop yard redundancy issue and other general issues. Hop Yard Farms is about 11.5 miles total from the substation, most of which is heavily wooded, thus most outages are tree-related. The new Route 3 section of the circuit will be in an underground feed, which should reduce the number of outages significantly. They have been working on the project since before Christmas, and all of the underground equipment has now been installed. They have reasonable confidence the project will be finished in early May. It will provide a significant improvement in reliability, as anywhere in the zone, they should be able to get back online within minutes, not hours or days, hopefully. So a lot of that was up there in the woods back behind Rokeby, they dug underground along Route 3 and put in special lines just for y'all in Hop Yard to take care of you. All right. I have an upcoming event that I want to publicize, the Sergeant Nicholas C. Mason Memorial Post 12202 Veterans of Foreign Wars, King George, will hold a first anniversary of its Institution Day on Sunday, May 1st at Barnesfield Park from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. And we will hear a board resolution regarding their Institution Day later this evening. Thank you all for coming out this evening. I too would like to note the passing of Stephanie Young, wife of former County Administrator Dr. Neiman Young, on Friday, April 15th. I first met Stephanie at the Home Show in March 2017, shortly after their arrival in King George. Stephanie left an indelible mark on our community. As a volunteer for a number of nonprofits during their years here, including King George YMCA, Ralph Bunche Alumni Association, the American Legion Auxiliary, and the Dahlgren Lions Club, who named her Lion of the Year in 2020. So I think Ms. Bender's suggestion for 2020 is particularly fitting. In addition to their normal Lions Club activities, Stephanie established the King George Flash Mob, which set up lunches at local businesses to offer them financial support as the pandemic wore on, as well as provided support to those suffering from cancer. Most notable also was the work she did to assist Uncle Dave's restaurant after the passing of its namesake and to keep his memory alive. Stephanie also provided lunches to every county department on a different day during the pandemic as a morale booster, and was often right by Neiman's side at every county event. You were the First Lady of King George, and most of all, my friend, and you will be missed. And I too, after Mr. Collins's report, respectfully request we observe a moment of silence in memory of Stephanie Young. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too went to a lot of places and did a lot of things, but I'm sure that you all don't really want to hear about all of them. So I'll move along. I am still concerned about the water authority's push to merge on the fast track with little public input. I'm also concerned in regards to this property at the Strawberry Hill, where they're going to purchase the property. There's been no environmental study on the property, so they don't know what they're getting. I hope they'll do that in their due diligence time. And tonight they mentioned the 100 houses at Walnut Hill. That's 100 more proposed units on the authority. That's also, if you have 2.5 kids per house, that's quite a few young people. So there's more an impact in many different ways. We continue to have housing, but we're a little short on business and industry. So Miss Stephanie Young, she was a friend, and she was, and Neiman is a friend and still is. I've known them since they've been here. Stephanie, you could always find her anywhere where someone needed help. She was the nicest person you'll ever meet. I don't think anybody in this room ever heard her say anything negative about anyone. I know for a fact that she was saved. And so we know that she is with our Lord in heaven. And so she's where we would all like to be. She was a great woman, and we pray for Neiman and his family. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. April 7th, I attended the LEPC meeting here in King George. There we discussed some of our local hazmat issues and complex responses that the fire department had all responded to. We also went through all of our bylaws and reappointments to the board as well. 13th, I also attended with Ms. Granger and Mrs. Bender the change of the deactivation and activation of the new 19th detachment down at the Space Command over there in Dahlgren, and we welcomed the new group, which is the Kraken, to King George, and all the folks that are there. Then that evening, we also attended another budget work session. Again, thanks to Mrs. Hahn and Mr. Miller for all your hard work on trying to get all the numbers straight for us and everything. So we certainly appreciate that. And I also echo my colleagues with my condolences to the entire Young family. So with all that said, if we could have a moment of silence for Mrs. Young. Okay, thank you, everyone. So moving on to the consent agenda. We have a motion?
Move to adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion properly second. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, could we remove 4-11-2? I got some questions about that for Ms. Hahn.
Sure, go ahead.
You want me to ask her now?
If you would like.
Approve the other two. I'd like to amend to do the other two.
So don't we need to amend the motion or withdraw the motion because it was as presented?
So I guess what's the, if we want to amend it, you had some questions. So did you want to ask this question?
Yeah, I think we can just have a friendly amendment to drop that item from the motion or withdraw the motion and have discussion.
Well, it's been seconded. We can have just discussion here. You can ask Mrs. Hahn questions and move on from there. Good.
Yeah, let's ask.
Okay, Mr. Collins, Mrs. Hahn,
Can answer questions, but
this is discussion.
Hello, Ms. Hahn, how are you?
I'm fine, and yourself?
Good. So I was looking over the check registrars, and in the general check registrar, what is the vendor name, the business card?
That is Bank of America credit card. That is all the charges countywide that are charged on individual department heads, some of your maintenance folks. So it's a conglomerate of many users countywide.
So that's a charge card.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Maybe we could put what that is in there other than business card, because I spent an hour today looking at the SCC, seeing what business that was, and if it did business in Virginia, and there was none, and so I didn't know what that was all about. So if we could just put that it is a credit card, so make it easier. Thank
Those
you.
registers that you're looking at come directly out of the system AS400. And that is how the vendor is listed to be paid. I can see if, she could write next to it, that's the credit card, but anytime you see business card, that is always going to be the credit card.
Okay. Can I get a copy of the vendor list when you get an opportunity?
Of the vendor list.
Approved vendors?
that's going to be very large listing. I'm not even sure. I'll see if we can run some reports. I'm not sure exactly what report we would run to get all of the vendors. So that's something I'll have to check into for you.
So every vendor is an approved vendor, right?
Every vendor that the county uses, we have a purchasing policy that on purchases under $5,000 that department heads can do their due diligence in seeking the best price for goods and services that they need, and they do not require a purchase order, but we do require that if they're using a new vendor that has not been set up, that we receive a W-9, but I don't believe anything comes before the board to set up any new vendors. And then over 5,000 to 15,000, they need to get 2 quotes in writing, and those are purchase orders, and anything between 15 and the 50 for capital, they have to have 3 written quotes.
So can I return to my original question? So is an approved vendor list or not?
Not approved by the board, I don't believe. No new vendors come before the board, but we do have W-9s on all of them. And the county department heads can use the vendors of their choice, just making sure that the due diligence is done to make sure that they are allowed to conduct business in the state of Virginia.
So, our job on the Board of Supervisors, our main job is to do due diligence in regard to finances. And so I do look through every single thing. So I would like to know what the approved vendors are. Thank you. That's all I have.
Anytime I have questions there for, when I go over them as well, you can call her and she will get with you and answer any of the questions of who they are on this great list that we have. Or you can,
Shouldn't have to do that. I should know I should be able to do my own information by the information that's provided. Anybody should be able to know what the vendor is approved for in King George County. Because I wouldn't say that we use any vendors that we wouldn't approve, but there could come a point where that could happen, that we don't want a specific vendor. Might sell pornography materials. We don't want that vendor.
Mr. Chair, can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Can we have staff provide all members of the board with the current purchasing policy so that we are all familiar with the policy as it currently stands? And then that way, if we have concerns with regard to how the policy is written, because that is our job, then perhaps we need to tweak the policy. But the policy is what staff uses to make their purchases. So if there's a bigger issue here on us, I don't disagree with you. That's a policy issue that we can have influence over. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
thank you. Any other questions, Mr. Collins?
So just to bring that back, Ms. Kopka. So I'm familiar with the policies. I've read the policies. I just want to know what the vendors are. It's not really that tough of an ask.
I don't think that it's a problem for us to get it. But in the middle of the budget, it may take a little bit more time than tomorrow or the next day, if that's okay.
Fine with me.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, we have a motion properly seconded with discussion over. All in favor? Okay.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. Moving on to constitutional officers report. Mr. Jones.
I'd like to echo and offer my condolences to Dr. Young and his family. I too knew Stephanie. She's a vibrant personality, and it's well documented all of the help that she rendered here to our constituents here in King George. So she will definitely be missed. March 2022 Treasurer's Report, the beginning balance, which was reconciled last month. When I came here last month, it had not been reconciled, but that issue was corrected. Beginning balance $32,987,761.99. County had receipts of $18,034,781.35. We had disbursements of $21,705,126.94, leaving the county with, in the general fund, a balance of $317,416.40. And that total has been reconciled to the general ledger.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Jones.
Good evening.
Mr. Miller, if you can just make sure those all get into the minutes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Moving on, 413, presentations and reports. Mr. Beal.
We had a public hearing.
412.
I'm sorry. I'm jumping ahead again. I'm sorry.
County attorney.
So yes, we do have our one public hearing.
We also have the report of the county attorney. I'm sorry.
Correct. Sorry, Mrs. Lackey.
And no problem. I'd have a few brief updates. The Virginia Department of Environmental Quality gave notice to the county that there has been a minor modification approved to Naval Surface Warfare Center Dahlgren Division's hazardous waste management storage permit. The modification simply removes room-specific information to provide greater flexibility for the storage of spill equipment. If anyone has any questions or wants to see the actual notice, I'm happy to provide it. I also became aware of 2 public comment periods that are currently going on that are through the Virginia Telecommunication Initiative that I wanted to mention. The first is with regard to the fiscal year 2023 guidelines for the Virginia Telecommunication Initiative, or VATI. Those proposed guidelines have an open public comment period currently that expires on May 2nd. There is information, the whole guidelines, the proposed guidelines are available on the website of the Department of Housing and Community Development. There is a summary at the beginning of the guidelines, so it's pretty approachable. Probably the most major change is that it defines the underserved areas to meet federal broadband speed requirements. So the threshold has been changed from, or will be changed if the proposed version is enacted, from 25 megabits per second download and 3 megabits per second upload to 100 megabits per second download and 20 megabits per second upload. So that would potentially create more areas that would qualify under the grant program. It would still give an application scoring weight to the lower speeds. So it would create more potentially eligible projects, but it would give, again, as I said, weight to, those areas where the speeds are really, really low. There's also a separate but kind of related public comment period going on for the Line Extension Customer Assistance Program. The guidelines for that are also posted on the Department of Housing and Community Development's website. That public comment period ends on May 4th, and I'm as of right now, I'm not very well versed on what those are, other than it's a program to support the extension of existing broadband networks to low and moderate income residents. So it might be of interest to the community, and so I wanted to bring that forward. And if I didn't mention it, that public comment period ends May 4th. So those 2 public comment periods are running simultaneously. They have slightly different close dates.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. Now we will move along and get to the public hearing I was about to skip over. The King George County Board of Supervisors will now hold a public hearing that has been properly advertised to receive public input regarding amendments to the King George County Code, Chapter 14, Article 9, cigarette tax ordinance to provide additional terms for forfeiture process and clarifications of matter, including presumptions as to unstamped cartons. I will first ask for staff report, and then I will open the floor to public comment. Public comment on this will be limited to 3 minutes per speaker in order to afford everyone an opportunity to speak. Please state your name and address before you comment. Upon completion of public comment, I will bring the matter back to the board for consideration. The board may or may not take action tonight, depending on information received during public comment. Mrs. Lackey.
So the animating purpose behind the current proposed amendments is to streamline enforcement provisions. We've had some enforcement activity, and so we've seen areas where we can be a little more clear in what that process is. I will say that's not to say that the ordinance differs. The existing ordinance doesn't differ very much from a lot of other localities. However, a lot of other localities use a cigarette tax board to do their enforcement for them. So there's another entity that has its own policies and procedures. So since King George is doing the enforcement through its own forces, it only makes sense to kind of spell out what those procedures are. One of the main changes is to clarify the forfeiture process. Right now, the language specifies that if you have unstamped cigarette packages and they're confiscated and seized, you go through a due process proceeding and they're forfeited, and then the county has to go to great expense and effort to get them sold, and then has to return half of the proceeds to the offender. That's not required by law, so one of the changes would be that the forfeiture would be absolute. Whatever the proceeds of the forfeiture would go back into the general fund, less the costs of collections, the collection effort and the sale effort. The forfeiture process would also specify disposition for seized assets. So once they're seized and they become forfeited at the conclusion of a due process hearing, it would specify that in appropriate circumstances, they could be sold back to an offender. For example, if it's a first-time offender or it was a small volume, if there's kind of mitigating reasons that make it a lot more mutually agreeable both to the offender and to the county, that they be sold back at the wholesale price to the person or the entity who they were confiscated from, rather than going through an auction process. That would be an option. That wouldn't be a requirement, but it would spell out that that is an option in addition to some kind of auction or public sale. In addition, with the approval of the Board of Supervisors, they could be destroyed. And an additional option would be that any confiscated unstamped cigarettes could also be used for law enforcement activity, for kind of undercover operations, or for training. So those would be specified as permissible dispositions for forfeited property. I wanted to point out the ordinance was enacted in April 20th of 2021 with an effective date of July 1st. And there's only been one previous amendment. It was a very small amendment to just adjust the date where tax records have to be submitted to the Commissioner of Revenue. So this is kind of the first wholesale group of amendments that would be considered to this ordinance. Additional changes relate to the fact that the word stamp is used with respect to both state and local tax stamps. It does make sense that in the county, we want to make it unlawful to have cigarettes that are both untaxed, that were untaxed at the state level and the local level, but there's some additional specificity applied to when the term stamp refers to either or both the state or the locality. And there's also some changes that clarify who might be responsible parties in the event of enforcement activity. And there's some other technical amendments that I'd be happy to discuss if anyone has any specific questions.
Any questions? Ms. Collins?
So I'm good with all the amendments except for the one where we could auction them. I think that we shouldn't be in the business of selling cigarettes
you can sell them back to the vendor who is they're forfeited by a circuit court judge. But I don't think that we should, disposition should be destruction and not selling to the public in an auction state. I don't think we need to be in the cigarette selling business.
A lot of the different areas on the boards, I mean, that's how they do it. And that's how they destroy or they do away with their seized cigarettes. So that's just an option that they have. So that's why we put that in there.
How would I answer a question to a child in my neighborhood who says, hey, I hear they seized a bunch of cigarettes and the Board of Supervisors is going to sell them. How much are they? I don't think that we need to be in the selling the cigarettes business. I don't think it's morally correct. You can use them for law enforcement purposes. You can use them, sell back to the vendor. But I don't think the county should be selling cigarettes, auctioning cigarettes in a forfeiture.
Okay. Anyone else? Ms. Kupka?
I don't have a problem with that.
Okay. So I guess we would need a motion to take it out.
If I may, we need to see if there is any.
I'm sorry, when I said I don't have a problem with that, I wasn't clear. I don't have a problem with us auctioning them.
Gotcha.
I'm very sorry for
Gotcha. Okay.
not being clear on that.
Gotcha. Okay.
If it's selling back to the vendor or auctioning them, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, you're just putting them back out there. I'm just fine with auctioning them off.
Mr. Stone, Mr. Chairman, I believe Ms. Lackey indicated that I think you need to go forward with the actual, is it the public hearing?
Yeah, I would recommend we have the hearing before any further discussion.
Okay. Right.
Might have more people.
So no other questions. We'll open the floor up to public comment. Anyone here for public comment on this matter? Mr. Dines, anyone online? Anybody received any written statements about this matter? Nope. Okay, well then we will close public comment. So do we have a motion?
Well, I know you said no more questions, but I know that was partly just to be able to get the comments. I don't know if Mr. Collins had anything else. I just didn't want to.
I still stand. I want it to be amended to remove the sale of cigarettes in a public auction.
Mr. Chair, I have another question, Ms. Lackey, on concerning that. Just so I understand, Ms. Lackey, a little bit. So for the cartons of cigarettes that are taken, repossessed, whatever you call the term, is, so what are the options you do with those normally?
So currently, the Commissioner of Revenue can develop policies and procedures for disposition. So this ordinance would clarify and specify a menu of options. The options would include destruction. They would include sale. They would also include resale, potentially at the wholesale value to the person or entity from who they were confiscated from. And lastly, they could be used for law enforcement purposes. And I should clarify, this is just for cigarettes. If there's any other paraphernalia that's confiscated, that's illegal, that of course wouldn't be sold because it's illegal from the get-go.
I guess I just needed, Mr. Collins brings up a good point, but more clarification. If it was auctioned, would it be specified that it was only offered to the organization, well, the businesses that the cigarettes were removed from, or could anybody buy them?
As you can imagine, cigarettes are something that only certain buyers and resellers can use. So that would, of course, require possibly a look at who the prospective purchasers were. So I would suspect that probably a primary option would be to resell at the wholesale price to the person or entity who they were confiscated from. However, it's a repeat offender. If it's a huge volume of cigarettes, it might be worthwhile to go forward with the auction from eligible buyers.
So there would be eligible buyers. It just couldn't be anyone. See where I'm coming from on that?
I believe so. I have not had the need to research that as of yet, but yes, I don't think anybody could go ahead and purchase, cartons upon cartons of cigarettes.
Well, they're generally seized for a reason because they're unstamped, and you have to be a registered stamp or a seller and a stamping agent to get the stamps, and you have to be bonded and everything. So Joe Blow public cannot go buy, 50 carton or 50 master cases of cigarettes.
Right. I'm just
Could go get the stamps
concerned.
from the commissioner's office. So I'm going to restate the same thing I just said. I don't think we should be in the business of selling cigarettes. You can use them for law enforcement. You can sell them back to the vendor. You can do all kinds of things with them, but not sell them to the general public. We shouldn't be in that business. Thank you.
They can't be sold to the general public. You have to be a licensed bonded agent.
Okay, but that's the general public. So you're a licensed agent. Doesn't say it in the ordinance either. Number one, and number two, why are we selling cigarettes?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
on page 7, section 14-215, registration and bond required. Every person selling, storing, or possessing cigarettes within or transporting cigarettes for sale or use within or into the county must register with the commissioner on a form prescribed by her. And then it outlines an entire process for someone, not just Joe Schmo or whoever, random Joe citizen, cannot, under the ordinance, just go out and buy these cigarettes. So I understand your concerns, Mr. Collins, but it is actually covered in the ordinance currently.
So slippery slope here. Start selling cigarettes. How about when the whole marijuana thing's up? When we start seizing that, are we going to start selling that too? That's a statement, not a question.
Anyone else? Nope. We have a motion?
Move to approve amendments to the King George County Code, Chapter 14, Article 9, Cigarette Tax Ordinance as presented.
Second.
We have a motion properly second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Chair votes aye. Motion passes.
You can ask for nays.
Actually, looking at the bottom of this page, actually, if we can go by roll call, please. I'm sorry.
Aye.
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 Nay.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Okay, now moving along to 413, presentations and reports, draft secondary 6-year plan, presentation by Mr. Beal from VDOT.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the board, it's good to be with you all again. This should look very familiar. We did this last year and we get to do it again. And actually, because your allocation is over $100,000, state law requires that we do it every year. If it were less than 100,000, or if it ever drops below 100,000, we can go to every other year. But it is a 6-year plan, and it is on the secondary system. So it's all the routes 600 and above. So not your 200 routes, not Route 301, not Route 3. It's all your 600 routes, basically. So the next slide. Thank you. This is the cover sheet, just shows all the different funding streams. Telefees is a major one, and Telefees money can be used on most anything within the secondary system. The district grant unpaved road funds can only be used to hard surface your gravel roads that are in the state system currently. And traditionally, that's what the board has used all the money for, is to hard surface existing gravel roads. Once we add roads to the plan and finalize the plan, I'll sign off on the cover sheet and I'll ask the county administrator to do the same thing. Next slide. So these are the roads that are already in the system, or already in the plan, I should say. Rixey Road, you see there the green column. It shows all the funding for Rixey Road. That estimate for that hard surface is $160,000, and all that funding is available now. So that is a road that we're planning to hard surface this year. The next one, Chestnut Hill, $118,000 estimate. That funding is available now as well. So we are planning to hard surface that this summer. On the next slide, you'll see Prim Road. You remember last year we prioritized a portion of Prim Road from Round Hill to Big Timber. That was 1.6 miles, and that came at an estimate of $510,000. That funding is available in FY23, which starts July 1 of 22. So we are trying to get that done this year. We'll open it up to charges probably in August, and it'll be one of the later ones we do this year. But we have some drainage issues to work out there, but we are going to try to get that done this year. The last two line items in the plan is countywide engineering and surveying and the future unpaved roads funds. So that's just where we park all the money until it's prioritized and put on a project. You see there's a little over $400,000 in both of those line items, and that's where we'll pull from to fund the projects that you add to the plan. Next slide. This is just a reminder about the Rural Rustic Program, which is the program we use to hard surface these roads. It must be an unpaved road that's already in the state system, so it's one that we're already maintaining. It's not a gravel road that's currently privately maintained or maintained by an HOA or something like that. We're not adding roads to the system with this. The roads can carry no more than 1,500 vehicles per day, so they're all relatively low volume roads. You must prioritize the road as a line item in the secondary 6-year plan for us to hard surface it. It must be predominantly local traffic. So if you're aware of a rezoning or a large tract you all would like to see developed on one of the unpaved roads, we'd ask that you not use the Rural Rustic Program to hard surface that road. Drainage must be adequate or only need minor improvements, and it's typical for us to replace some pipes or add some pipes as needed to make sure we protect the investment. The next page, next slide. This is a list of all the gravel roads that are currently maintained by VDOT in King George County. The routes in yellow, highlighted in yellow, have over 50 vehicles per day, just a vehicle volume. So it just indicates those roads are a little more heavily traveled than the others. And as long as we have routes in the county that are over 50 vehicles per day on the gravel roads, I just ask that you work to hard surface those first. You could use your telefees if you wanted to hard surface some of the ones that weren't on that list, but the unpaved road funds should go to the roads with over 50 vehicles per day. There's 3 roads there that are already talked about that are still on the list, and that's because they're still gravel, but they all are already on your plan. So Chestnut Hill Loop, Rixey Road, and a portion of Prim Road. You see they're already on the plan, but they're on your list. So that's the conclusion of my presentation. The $400,000, it's roughly $850,000 or so that we have to use to hard surface the roads. We use an estimate, a conservative estimate of about $80 a foot is what it costs. So if you do the math, it's a little less than, or right about 2 miles. So I would request that the board, if you're going to choose to continue with the rural rustic hard surfacing for this money, prioritize about 2 miles worth of roads. That'll get us through the out years of the 6-year plan. And you don't have to choose which roads you want to put on tonight. We do have the public hearing next month, so you can do it then. But if you do know the roads you want to add, I can prepare those in the draft and let you kind of show you how the money works out at the public hearing. But we can add, or I think last year we added them at the presentation, and then we took them out took one out anyway at the public hearing. So it's whatever the board's wishes are.
Mr. Chair, may I make a suggestion?
Yes.
So I feel like last year we took out Canning Way due to some public comment opposed to having that. So I certainly would not want to put that back in, but I would like to see what my colleagues thought about the other side of Prim, since we're doing the one side now, put in the other 1.35 miles, the other side of Prim from Stony Knoll to Big Timber.
Mr. Chair, I agree with that. I was going to bring that up. And one of the things I wanted to ask, thank you for addressing that. You're going to be addressing the drainage issues on that road. Does the second portion have a lot of drainage issues also? Just remember, I know the one part that's really bad, that's swampy.
You know, I would assume it's all about the same. There were at least 3 sections I was concerned about, but full disclosure, I turned on Big Timber and made a left before I came to the meeting today, so I saw all the puddles. I didn't go to the right, so I'd have to refresh my memory on the other half.
Okay, but I agree with Ms. Kupka that is an important road, and it has a lot of issues in the past 2 years that you've had to go out there and address, and probably hard surfacing it would make it a little better.
Anyone else?
So you're saying about 2 miles total. I don't recall how much, because it was a portion of Prim Road. How much was that supposed to cover? I don't recall.
Last year was 1.6, and this 1.35 is what remains.
That's okay. So that is already what's remains. Okay, so it was 1.6. Okay. Okay. So you're saying there's still, if we were to move forward with that one, there'd still be a little over a half a mile we could estimate for being able. Okay. Just wanted to make sure I understood. Thank you.
And if you just wanted to add Prim, add the other part of Prim and leave the next, I mean, that's more than probably 2 or 3 years worth of funding. So
Tracking.
you could just.
I'm amenable to adding the rest of Prim as well. And then we can continue to evaluate what else to then prioritize.
Everybody good with that? Sure, Mr. Reel, if you could add that in, that'd be great.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, while we have Mr. Beal here, we might want to address the 2 items that one you brought up about the Dahlgren Road, no through trucks, and Ms. Bender had brought up the Eden Drive. I have spoken with David about this, and I think he could provide an overview of the process that is involved in looking at both of those situations.
Okay. Ms. Beal?
So through truck restrictions on 206, that's a primary route. So ultimately that has to be approved by the Commonwealth Transportation Board. So it's a process that starts with the Board of Supervisors. You have to hold a public hearing and then forward a resolution requesting the through truck restriction to VDOT. We do an internal review, send it from the district to the state, to the commissioner, to the Commonwealth Transportation Board. We also hold a public hearing. So it's up to the board. If you want to pursue that, we can start that. I don't know if you have any other specific questions.
Well, commenting on that one, I mean, even just this morning headed to base, I passed 3 trash trucks headed just rolling, cutting right through loaded, coming from the bridge towards the landfill. So I think that's definitely, we're in full agreement with that one to continue that process.
So the county would just need to hold a public hearing and pass a resolution. And I can give you a sample resolution, the one that's been done in the past.
You sent that to me. I think Mr. Miller has that. I forwarded that to you. Okay. And Mrs. Bender's comment on the speed limit change on Eden?
Eden Drive, I believe it's currently 45,
45 and 35.
45 and 35. So speed limits generally are set based on the 85th percentile speed. So we would conduct a speed study, measure the 85th percentile speed, and the rationale is that 85% of the drivers feel that safe driving down the road. That's a good speed limit. Absent a crash history to say that they're not doing that safely. So if the board wanted us to look at the speed limit, we would do a speed study. Speed study would be funded from the countywide engineering and surveying line item of the secondary 6-year plan. They typically cost a few $1,000s. My experience is 9 out of 10 speed studies will retain the existing speed based on the 85th percentile and the speed limit. Some other things that often get discussed with speed issues are traffic calming. Traffic calming is reserved for neighborhood streets, 25 miles an hour. And in-road traffic calming measures also have a threshold of 85th percentile speed, 10 miles an hour over the existing speed limit. There is another option, which is a fines higher policy, which allows a judge to assess additional fine of $200 for speeding. In order to put those signs up, the 85th percentile speed, again, has to be 10 miles over the existing speed. So that might be if we did the speed study and they were going 45 in the 35 or 55 in the 45, we could potentially put the fines higher signs up. I don't know if that answers your question. That's about all the options for speeding.
It answers the question. I guess there's no easy answer. And my concern is those two new developments on that road. That road has become quite busy and there's not a lot of forgiveness on the road because it was never designed to have these huge housing developments on it.
Right. And that's, coming back to the secondary 6-year plan, if the county decided, hey, from, what is it, Oakwood Estates, from there to 301, you wanted to widen the road, to do some trench widening, give another foot or two of lane width. That's something that we could do through the secondary 6-year plan. I mean, it takes away from, you would have to use the tele fees because you can't use your unpaved road funds. The county could also add funding in local funds. You could apply for, potentially apply for revenue sharing, which is a 50% match. But that's something else you can do through the secondary 6-year plan to improve some of the secondary roads that are, maybe you don't like the curvature or the lane widths or whatever the issues are. Those are things you can do through the secondary 6-year plan other than just hard surface and gravel roads. But the money doesn't go as far for those types of improvements. It just gets real expensive really quick, especially when you start having to buy right away.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Collins?
Some of those issues should have been worked out before the development was approved, as far as not the speed limit, but the width of the roadway and so forth. So inherently with development, you're going to have more problems upon these secondary roads that weren't really designed to take these flows of traffic. I don't think that lowering the speed limit specifically would make that road any safer. Pretty much a straight shot. I'm not saying I'm not disagreeing, but I am agreeing with Mr. Stonehill that we need to move forward because the board's been talking about it for as long as I can remember. So I say we put together all that stuff and move forward with the 206, except for the local truck traffic, dump trucks and those things. Thank you.
Anything else? Mr. Beal, how does storm cleanup coming along?
They're almost done on the interstate, and I'm told once they're done on the interstate, we'll see an influx everywhere else. So I expect in the next week or two, we'll have several crews working in King George. The latest press release says that we're hoping to be done by June. I hope that's right.
Yeah, there's a lot of trees in King George between now and June. And grass cutting is upon us.
Right. There are 22 crews working in Fredericksburg District. They just finished up in Culpeper. We're supposed to be getting 8 more crews on Monday. So that'll put 30 crews in the district. We finished the interstate. They told me 8 crews in King George within the next 2 weeks. So I'm hoping they clean it up quick.
Yep, great. All right, no other questions? Thank you.
Are there any other questions on my report, or do you want me to stick around?
I think we're good.
If I could, I'd just highlight a couple things. I did see the chip seal is underway in Eden Estates. So just remember they're coming back after that sets up, and they'll put that slurry seal down. Oakland Park was able to remedy the issue with some roads not being on the schedule. So we got all the roads in Oakland Park on the schedule. And thanks to Mr. Miller and his team for getting us all those addresses, we were able to send out letters to all the residents. And as of the date, I haven't gotten any complaints from Eden Estates. So I think everybody understanding the expectation has really helped with that. The plant mix schedule, I don't think they will start until May on 301 and Port Conway. So I expect to see them in May on those 2 routes. And then Ridge Road, not until June, and finishing up in Oakland Park on French Court in September. I did have one request from Ms. Kupka to review the crosswalk out here on Route 3. Sent that to the district, and I expect to hear back on that recommendation in the next 30 to 60 days. So I'll keep the board abreast of that. That's all I had.
Okay, thanks for coming out.
Thank you very much.
Moving on to 414, County Administration Resolution commending the Sergeant Nicholas C. Mason Memorial Post 12202, Veterans of Foreign Wars. Ms. Kupka?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for entertaining my request with regard to the resolution. I want to thank all of you for coming out this evening and for your patience. I will go ahead and read the resolution, and then the chairman will call for a vote. And then if it is okay with the board, I would like the members of the VFW to come forward, and we'll take a nice photograph for them. Thank you very much. Resolution of the King George County Board of Supervisors commending the Sergeant Nicholas C. Mason Memorial Post number 12202, King George, Virginia, Veterans of Foreign Wars. Whereas the Sergeant Nicholas C. Mason Memorial Post number 12202, Veterans of Foreign Wars, is designated in memory of Army Sergeant Nicholas C. Mason of King George, Virginia, killed in action on December 21, 2004 in Mosul, Iraq. And whereas on May 1, 2021, 33 members and 11 officers recited the VFW members' obligation and received the Cross of Malta, the emblem of the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States, at its institution ceremony at King George High School. And whereas the membership of VFW Post number 12202 has grown to over 100 members, including men and women from all branches of military service. And whereas in its brief history, the members of VFW Post number 12202 have contributed countless hours of time to help their fellow veterans with understanding veterans' benefits and connecting them to certified veteran service officers. And whereas VFW Post number 12202 continues to fulfill its mission with the hard work and generosity of its members and through partnerships with affiliate organizations, including the VFW Post number 12202 Auxiliary. And whereas VFW post number 12202 has promoted patriotism, supported veterans, and offered valuable outreach to local community organizations such as Some Gave All, Leashes of Valor, King George Little League, Cub Scout Pack 38, King George Love Thy Neighbor, Friends of Caledon State Park, and regularly assists veterans in long-term care at Heritage Hall. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the King George County Board of Supervisors hereby commends the Sergeant Nicholas C. Mason Memorial Post number 12202 Veterans of Foreign Wars on the first anniversary of its institution. And be it further resolved that May 1 is hereby recognized as Sergeant Nicholas C. Mason Memorial Post number 12202 Veterans of Foreign Wars Institution Day in King George County, adopted by the King George County Board of Supervisors this 19th day of April 2022.
Move to adopt the resolution as presented.
Second.
Your motion properly second. Any discussion? Seeing none, we will do a roll call vote, please.
Aye.
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 Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Thank you. If you all want to come on up and we'll get some pictures, Mr. Dines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And once the resolution is signed, I'll get you all a signed copy of it so you can display it, hopefully eventually in a building of your own.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, sir. All right, moving along, 415 Department of Finance, transfer fiscal year 2022 ARPA funds between projects. Mrs. Hahn.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. At a meeting that was held last October 19, 2021, the King George County Board of Supervisors approved the transfer of $2,059,130 from the project line that we had set up for ARPA expenditures to a list of numerous expenditures. Some of those projects are now complete and they have funds remaining in those project lines. And at this time, we'd like to move those back to the main project line. And additionally, at the budget work session held on March 2nd, 2022, the Board of Supervisors reviewed 3 projects that we were going to include in next fiscal year's allotment of ARPA funds. However, staff would like to move forward at this time with the project for the registrar's office so that she can get that project underway and complete before the in-person early voting starts, so as to lower the congestion in the building here. Additionally, I'd like you to consider the request from the Office on Youth that came to the budget work session on March 16th, 2022, requesting $14,372 from our ARPA funds. So if you would consider that, as well as the 30,000, the transfer lines are down below. And just in case you had questions, the first three lines were for the bonus that was given to the sheriff's office. I believe he had some change in personnel between the time he asked for the funds and the time that we administered those. So was some savings there. Then the roll-off containers for the Sealson's Convenience Center came in under bid, under estimate, as well as the roll-off truck came in under estimate. And so that's a total of $46,769 in savings that would go back to the line. And then I'm requesting to transfer, and we would, if this request is approved, we would set up a GL line for the registrar's office as well as the Office on Youth. So the recommended action is to authorize the county administrator to transfer remaining funds as listed below to the ARPA projects expenditure line, and then to transfer from that line to the registrar's project and the Office on Youth request as listed below. And the in your board packet was the quote for the remodel as well as the ARP request from the Office on Youth.
Thank you. Any questions for Mrs. Hahn? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion.
I move to authorize the county administrator to transfer remaining funds as listed below in the ARPA project expenditure line and transfer from ARPA projects expenditure line to the registrar's project and the OOY request as listed below.
Second.
We have a motion properly second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Chair votes aye, motion passes. Thank you. Uh, 416, Department of Parks and Rec, Parks User Guidelines Update. Mr. Clark.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Last updated in February 2020, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee, Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee and the Parks and Recreation staff recommend an update to two items in our Parks User Guidelines. First is an edit to the section titled Use of Alcohol and Controlled Substances. This edit will allow renters to have alcohol present at their event with the approval of the Director of Parks and Recreation and with the possession of a permit from the Virginia Alcohol Beverage Control Authority. This matches the policy for the Citizen Center. The second update is to the section titled Tobacco Products. This update adds vaping as not permitted in the areas where tobacco is already not permitted. In addition, playgrounds were inadvertently left off the original guidelines and are added in this update. I recommend that the Board of Supervisors approve these updates to the Park User Guidelines as presented.
Any questions for Mr. Clark? Collins, any questions? Okay. Do we have a motion?
I move to approve the updates to the park use guidelines as presented.
Second.
We have a motion properly second. Do we have any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay, 417, discussion items. Seeing none, County Administrator's Report, 418.
Wait for it to come up. I know we have, at the last work session on the budget, there were some questions about specifically two of the fees. And so I have them on the bottom, but I'm going to flip them if I could. I'm going to ask that Mr. Clark, I should have told him to just stay up there, but the Parks and Recreation fees that I think there, Mr. Collins, you had a question about, and so.
Did you forward my questions to him?
So I was.
He was online, he
I
knows.
apologize for not being present at the last meeting. It was the same night as our Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee meeting. I was watching online, but was about 10 minutes behind in the discussion. So when I realized I was needed and I switched over to go to meeting, you'd moved on to the next subject. So the first question that came up, and I took notes on the questions that were asked by all the members of the board. One was on the Independence event salaries. That is a county-sponsored event, so those salaries are paid from the TAC funding that was approved by the board, I believe, last month. So that's where those salaries will be for those parks employees that work that event. There was a question about the supervision fee, which is part of our field user fees. That is paid for outdoor events that request or need a supervisor on site. The last rental to pay this fee was the St. Patrick's Soccer Tournament in 2021 that rented Sealston Sports Complex. They requested that we have a parks worker on site during the event. That fee is slated to go from $25 to $30 an hour to keep up with salaries. So if we take a typical parks worker making approximately $16 an hour, they're usually working on a weekend at a $24 hour rate, plus benefits equals approximately $30. So that's where that fee is moving from $25 to $30. There were multiple questions about the school rental fees when we're renting a gym. Based on the school use agreement that we have that was entered into in 2014 and is slated to be reviewed this year. By agreement, it's supposed to be reviewed every year and has not been since. We began working with Ms. Lackey on that in school board to make sure we update that. Those rates, a typical rental of a school gym for us is 2 hours. Usually we get a baseball practice, a basketball practice, somebody wants to use the gym. So in that time, they're paying 2 hours. Right now, that fee would be $50. Our staff member works 3 hours. So they usually report approximately 30 minutes prior and stay 30 minutes after, preparing the facility for use and then cleaning up based on our agreement with the schools after use. So that fee would move to $70. The staff members who work that rental currently make anywhere from $12.50 to $15 an hour, although we have had rentals recently where we've had full-time staff members in there. So even the proposed $70 fee would not quite capture their salaries. So a total rental with that $12.50 to $15 is anywhere from $37.50 to $45 for just their salaries. When we add in benefits, FICA, Medicare of about 9%, we're looking at about $4 more. And then there's administrative time to process that, anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes, depending on who's working and putting into our system, and anything we do behind the scenes, including scheduling, that could cost us anywhere from $6 to $30. So a total 3-hour rental can cost the department anywhere from $48 to $80. And so that's where we propose going to $35 an hour. There was a question about contributions from the Parks and Recreation to school facilities when we use them. So we don't really profit, as like shows that example, on our uses, but we do contribute back to schools. So when the middle school constructed the new softball field, because it had to move, the old softball field had to move because of the parking lot and the renovations, the very first call about 2 weeks prior to them playing softball was there were no bases included in the renovation of the school. So the athletic director called our department and said, we need bases and a home plate and a pitcher's plate, and we need to start play. Knowing that it would be a use of ours as well, we contributed $718.40 for home plate, 3 bases, and pitcher's plate. Our staff, county staff, both general properties and Parks and Recreation, installed those bases, had to measure everything out. It was a struggle to find the pins that the surveyors had put in at an approximate cost of $500 in staff time. We provided $250 worth of sand to the middle school baseball field to help repair holes that were caused by middle school football during that process, but the field was not playable. And so to be able to make it playable, we helped contribute that. Their staff and their teams put down and put the sand into the holes, but we contributed that. And just last week, we replaced bases on the Sealston Elementary baseball field, just as a few examples of things that we do to put into recreation facilities that are also school facilities. There was a question about the lights at the middle school field specifically. The only user of those lights is King George Little League at this time. King George Little League and King George Youth Football Athletic Association don't pay user fees or rental fees. They pay an affiliate fee. which was a policy the board set up a number of years ago. That affiliate fee pays for the items that those two programs use. So that's the chalk, the paint, repairs to bases, home plates, those things of that nature. So they don't pay an actual reservation. That's based on the number of players they have. Prior to the affiliate fee they were paying, we were actually adding up at the end of the season how many bags of materials we were using and trying to come up with a bill. We averaged the 3 seasons prior, and they all averaged out to about $10 a player. And so in discussions with Lily, that's how we came to that number. The portable lights at Sealston, I believe Mr. Granger asked about, those actually are property of King George United Soccer Club. We have asked them to remove them as their use of them has curtailed now that sunset is much later. The good news is we are working currently with purchasing to put out the RFP for the lights that the board has approved. So we can put those soccer lights on, and hopefully those portable lights will not return to the park in the fall because we'll have our new lights up. But that's what it is. Their fee schedule was approved in a separate rental agreement authorized by the former county administrator. And then use of the high school was a question. All use of the high school is under the purview of Mr. Fisher when it comes the athletic director, when it comes to athletic facilities or the cafeteria, and under Ms. Wines when it comes to use of the auditorium. So all fees collected by the high school stay in the school accounts. My understanding is anything collected use of the turf, that's earmarked for replacement of the turf. So those are where all the fees came from. I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Any questions for Mr. Clark?
So, yes, one question. The lights, who's paying for the lights? The overhead lights, the night lights? Who's paying the electricity bill?
That's paid by the owner of the facility. So in the case of the middle school, in case of the high school. Case of Sealston Sports Complex in Barnesfield Park, we are.
But you have a light fee.
Yes, so we don't charge the light fee to our affiliates. It is there typically, the only time we've charged that so far is to long-term tournaments that are using the fields. These fees have not been in place yet, even for 2 years. Prior to that, no one was paying anything to use our fields. So we have the fee in there as a use. And it deters some people from extending hours, but we haven't charged that light fee very often.
Where would the light fee go? To you guys?
All the fees are submitted to us. So at this point, no one has rented a school facility to use the lights.
So if the schools are paying for the lights, when there's events for there, then the school should be getting the money for the lights.
I mean, I understand. I understand where you're coming from. At this point, we have not charged for the lights at the middle school. That's the only lights that we would even be able to control. Now, with the upgrade, when their new lights are installed, hopefully later this year, then there would be a difference in that.
And we weren't looking for, there's no approval of this. I mean, you're going to do that through your budget, but I think you all had questions, and that's why Mr. Clark was coming tonight anyhow, so it was meant to give you answers. And
And it
then
was approval of fees.
we presented the fees at the last work session so that you would have that as part of what you ultimately approve for the budget. So it wasn't meant to be, you didn't necessarily have to approve it at the last meeting. It gives us direction. If the board wants to approve it tonight, that's fine. We'll put it in our revenue line. I'm sure Ms. Hahn would be appreciative of that, but it's not necessary.
The only fee that is changing that was presented was the one for the Citizen Center that actually affects the general fund. All the other fees are in the activity fund, which is independent from the general fund and the tax revenue budgets.
Questions? Okay. Thank you, sir.
And then we have Ms. Hahn. I think there was a question about the change of use fee that was included in the presentation. Excuse me, not Ms. Hahn. Ms. Hall, Ms. Hahn, Ms. Hall, sorry.
I'll give you a pass on that one. I understand that there were some questions regarding the change of use permit fee. For example, that would be implied for any time that you have a more restrictive use that is now changing to a less restrictive use. We still have to go in, provide a new certificate of occupancy permit, check to make sure they have proper emergency exits, bathrooms, their occupancy load, things of that nature. So this is when they may not necessarily need a building permit or a plumbing permit, but they do need that new certificate of occupancy and that occupant load. So that's what that fee is in place for.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that, because I was concerned that somebody would come in and be charged new permitting fees plus this change of use fee.
No, ma'am. This is strictly when a business changes from one business to another, and they continue that business forever and ever. It is a one-time fee.
Okay, so they don't have to get all those other permits on top of it?
No.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Thank you, Ms. Hall.
Welcome. Thank you.
The other two, excuse me, the other two items on there, one is the tourism strategic plan. I know we've talked about it, and Mr. Minor had asked that we put this back in your laps as to an interest in approving it officially. So it's not tonight, but if you could, we can send it to you again if you don't have it, and let you take a look at it and give us some comments. And then we can schedule it on a future meeting and you can approve it, or you can tell us how we got to go back to work on it. So whatever, we just needed to kind of circle back and get your input or get your approval on that. The other item on there is we received a request for letters of support from Ms. Gullickson with Germanna Community College for a cybersecurity program and a healthcare program. And I can prepare that letter and provide it to Mr. Chairman Stonehill if that's appropriate, or however you guys want to do it.
What's the Kane Warner and Spanberger up there for?
Because those are the letters that they're going to send to those specific federal representatives, Senators Kane and Warner and Congresswoman Spanberger.
May I ask a question, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
So are you able to share, can you send the correspondence from Germanna Community College to the
Yes, I
members
thought
of the
that we
board? 'Cause
did.
To me, this is, I don't recall, unless I missed.
I'm sorry if we
I miss emails, but to me, your request is just a little vague right now. So if we
Yes,
can
and
get
that's,
some more
my
specific
apologies. I thought
information.
that was sent to you all. I will forward that to you. So
Thank
no
you.
problem.
Is it, I mean, is it time sensitive, or can we, even if we have to do it next Wednesday at the budget work session, you can put it in the hopper for that? But I just feel like we just don't have really a lot of information on that one, and I would like to see some more information. Thank you.
So the Spanberger, she's not our representative at this time, right?
Well, I assume they are represented, the community college is represented by her in some capacity.
Germanna is a larger district, and I think Spotsylvania is Ms. Spanberger's currently, so Germanna is affiliated with Spotsylvania.
We're affiliated with Germanna, not Spanberger. Our letter should be in reference to Whitman. He's our representative. I don't understand why we're sending a letter to a representative that doesn't even represent this district.
We need to see what the letters are, yeah. and
We'll forward
all
all
that
that to you. That's my mistake. I apologize.
Probably won't be representing our district next year.
You have been, the information has been sent to you all tonight, but I will follow up and we'll provide you with the information. If we do need to, if it is time sensitive, then we'll have it for you to consider at the next meeting on the 27th, the work session, if that's appropriate.
Hold on this email, it says due this Wednesday. at the top of the email. Letters of support request due this Wednesday. So it is time sensitive.
There's no meeting tomorrow. We don't have a work session tomorrow.
So, Mr. Chair, this was just sent yesterday? Yesterday. This was sent to us yesterday. And they need it by Wednesday.
Well, what I could do is I could write the letter as county administrator without the authorization of the Board of Supervisors.
Not really. You represent the Board of Supervisors.
Well, that's fine. I just, if it's not going to be a vote, I'm just trying to do this in some way to move this forward. If there's no desire to do it, then let me know.
Just reading the first one that I opened up to Mr. Warner, before agreeing to it, I would like a little more information about this cybersecurity center too before I endorse it. I'm not saying it's not a good thing, but without knowing very much about it, except for a little information in the letter.
Yeah, I think we need a whole lot more information on this. I mean, they sent something to us yesterday and it's due tomorrow. I can't go along with that.
Before I make my motion, I see Mr. Miners here, and he is not on my motion to be included in the closed session. Should he be?
What? So my understanding is that the specific issue at hand, he's not really, but I wouldn't have any problem with him being in there.
Yeah, it would be nice to have, and
I just want to make sure I add him as a name and
Miss
he's not
Hall.
on the listed.
And Miss Hall.
And Miss Hall. Okay, good.
Really?
Awesome. Miss Hall. Okay. I apologize, though, Mr. Miller. I stepped in and you're in the middle of your county administrator's report. I don't want to.
No, I'm done.
Okay. In that case, I move that the King George County Board of Supervisors convene in closed meeting pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A5 and A7 to discuss a projected timeline and process related to prospective business or industry where there is no previous announcement of a business or industry locating or expanding in the community, and consultation with legal counsel regarding specific legal matters requiring the provisions of legal advice, namely land use matters associated with a prospective unannounced industry. I invite the county administrator, county attorney, Ms. Hall, and Mr. Minor, because they are deemed necessary and or their presence will reasonably aid the board in its consideration of the topics to be discussed pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3712F.
We have a motion probably second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We are in closed session.
Ready? I move that the King George County Board of Supervisors return to public meeting and certify by vote that only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered during the closed meeting.
And if we can also certify by vote, please.
So certify.
So certify.
So certify.
So certify.
Chair so certifies. We are in open session.
I move to adjourn until Wednesday, April 27th at 5:30 PM in the boardroom.
We motion properly second. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We are adjourned.